Hey, good morning. It's Dr. James. I do hope and pray this message finds you and your loved ones peaceful, thriving, and well. And you know what? Every now and then, I'm sure you and I have been accused of being delusionally optimistic. And sometimes you go, wow, you know what? Do they see something I don't see? And I know. Gosh, do I know that we're seeing what's going on out there. And sometimes we got to muster up all our spiritual conviction, our strength, and our everything we got to keep our lights on, don't we? It's hard some days. But you know, every now and then we get a study that underscores why we do what we do and why we are committed to keeping the hope on, keeping the love light turned on brighter and louder and more courageously than ever. And a study that just came out of Australia is so beautiful because they were able to quantify through a very large group over a large period of time what optimism does for us, but probably even more importantly, how pessimism affects us. In fact, what they basically did, they took a large group of people and they scored them week after week for several years. And they found out the more pessimistic one was, the more likely they were to die early. In fact, the more likely they were to contract diseases that actually made them leave the planet early, upwards of 2 years earlier. Now you may say 2 years, but you know what? The challenge was, it was the years leading up to that, was the chronic debilitating diseases that finally took their life. But for years previous to this, their quality of life was not good emotionally or physically. And what I love about this study, the direct contrast to that was the ones who scored highest on the optimism side, they were the ones who lived longest and strongest and had the lowest rates of debilitating diseases way into the longest part of their life. And I read this and I say to myself, wow, okay, that's cool, but what can we do to make sure that during these challenging times, like no other times, we find out ways that we can use optimism to help us to keep long and strong in our outlook and our attitude. And one of the things that it reminds me of is that we know from Harvard studies that being present is probably the most powerful practice we can use that literally helps us to stay optimistic. And last week, we did a study on savoring, which is another way of staying present with the things that give us hope and gratitude and love and a sense of joy and sense of peace. And we also know that that actually helps our mind to feel present. And what we know from Harvard is that only about 50% of our life, we are present. The majority of the time, though, we are spending our time in future fear. We are forecasting something that's not going to go well, worried about something that we can't control that we think is going to go wrong. And the more we ruminate on and forecast on that, it shows that it affects our heart, it affects our immune system, it affects every part of our physiology. It literally expresses itself on a genetic level to get our genes to mutate and then progress towards diseases. So, I think more than ever, mindfulness and presence is such an incredible practice for us. And it takes a lot of courage these days, right? When you go into Facebook, you go on Instagram and you see things and you start going into comparison mode and you start wondering whether or not you're worthy, which is another way of actually going into the future, whether you measure up, whether you have relevance. The most important thing we can do right now, and this study underscores this, is to heroically stand in the present moments. Look at your life and look through the lens and the optics of the things that actually make you feel hopeful, the things that make you feel purposeful, the things that make you feel alive. You know, when Krishnamurti said it's no declaration of genius to be profoundly aligned with the profoundly sick society, I think what he was suggesting is that the more that we are looking outside of ourselves versus inward, is the more we're going to find ourselves under distress, under the influence of things that we can't control. And we start going into locus of control issues where we actually start focusing on external locus of control. So this study, and what we know to be true, why we do what we do here every single morning, we focus on what we can do in this moment, what we can do to heroically stand in this moment. When we're with someone, love them deeply. When we're with just ourselves, talk to yourself, talk to ourselves like our very best friend would talk to us. These are the moments that we create presence. Yes, our genes will love us and express longevity. Yes, our immune systems will help to fight disease. But probably more than anything, we become a broadcasting agent of possibility for others. It's beautiful to be around people like you. And the more that we heroically stand in that truth, with our heart centered in that truth, the more we give permission for others to get present with what is. You know, I have no idea what's going to happen later in this next moment, let alone this next day, let alone this next year. But I do know there's something beautiful about being in this space of heroic grace. You could call it delusional optimism, but Mayo years ago said one of the most beneficial predispositions emotionally and spiritually and physically is to live your life with moderate delusional optimism, basically believing that you are going to be okay as long as you stay connected to what matters in your life. People, practices, God, love. Stay connected to those things. You will be present more than you can ever imagine. And as you imagine this, you become that. Whew. Boy, is it a good time to be present. Stay where you are. You're going to have power here. You're going to have presence here. And you're going to have peace here. Much love, every blessing. Have a beautiful day. Bye for now.